The cafe wasn't quiet, it was careful. Cups met saucers with soft restraint. Rain blurred the glass, turning faces outside into outlines, uncertain, unfinished. At a corner table, she sat straighter than comfort allowed. Her dress was neat, her hair rehearsed, but her hands betrayed her, folding and unfolding the napkin again and again. Across from her, a man leaned back, eyes restless, voice low but cutting. When he left, the chair swung empty, like a door left open in wind. At the next table, a father stirred 2 cups, one for himself, one for a boy too quiet for his age. He didn't mean to look, but some silences call louder than words. The clock above the counter ticked with an uneven rhythm, one that made waiting feel heavier than time itself. The cafe wasn't new, but it was cared for. Tables polished by years of elbows, conversations, and quiet hopes. The air carried the faint smell of coffee grounds and warm bread. Outside, rain tapped against the window with the patience of someone trying not to be heard. She sat near the corner window, the kind of seat that made a person visible but still safe. Her coat was draped neatly over the back of the chair. A paper menu rested untouched beside her phone. Her name was Layla, mid-20s, hair pinned carefully to hide the parts she didn't like about herself. A floral dress, modest, slightly tight around the arms, but chosen with effort. Every few minutes she looked toward the door, not desperately, just enough to seem prepared. When he arrived, the bell above the cafe door rang sharply. He didn't notice her at first. His phone claimed his eyes. Then he saw her, gave a polite nod and walked over. Layla, she nodded, standing a little too fast. Hi, Mark. He didn't shake her hand, just gestured to the chair. Sorry I'm late. Traffic. He wasn't late. She had been early. The waiter came. Orders were brief. Coffee for him, tea for her. When the waiter left, silence settled again, the kind that people try to fill but don't know how. So, Mark leaned back, eyes flicking over her face, then lower. You look different from your pictures. Layla's smile held, thin and brave. Different how? He shrugged. Just fuller, I guess. The words landed like small stones, not loud but heavy. Layla's hands tightened around her cup. The warmth felt undeserved now. She tried to laugh, soft and unconvincing. Oh, cameras can be kind. He checked his phone again. No, it's fine. I just think honesty is important, right? Across the room, a young boy was stacking sugar packets, one on top of another, balancing them like fragile towers. His father, early 30s, quiet eyes, work jacket folded beside him, watched without interrupting. The boy's name was Noah, the father's Daniel. Daniel noticed Layla, not in the way Mark did, just enough to sense something uneven, the kind of silence that carried weight. Mark talked about himself, his gym routine, his job, his dislike for people who let themselves go. His voice was light, but his words were sharpened at the edges. Layla nodded when needed, her gaze occasionally drifting toward the window, where raindrops slid down like threads unraveling. When Mark finally said, "I don't think we're a match," it sounded rehearsed, something he'd said before. He stood without finishing his drink. Layla stayed seated. Her cup was cold now. The bell rang again as he left. His reflection disappeared from the glass, leaving only hers. Across the cafe, Noah looked up. "Dad?" he whispered. "That lady looks sad." Daniel followed his gaze. Layla was straightening her napkin again and again, as if order could erase embarrassment. "She'll be okay," Daniel murmured. But his eyes lingered longer than his words. Noah frowned, sliding one of his sugar towers aside. "Can we give her something?" Daniel hesitated. "Like what?" The boy thought. A cookie. She didn't eat anything. Daniel exhaled. The kind of breath that holds both understanding and restraint. "Finish your juice first." He turned back to his coffee. The cup was still warm, but the moment wasn't. At Layla's table, the waiter returned. "Would you like anything else?" She smiled faintly. "Just the bill, please." Her voice barely made it past the noise of the espresso machine. As she waited, she noticed a reflection, a boy watching her. When their eyes met, he didn't look away, just smiled, small and earnest. Layla managed a small nod in return, a shared courtesy between strangers. When the waiter brought the bill, there was a brief pause, a folded note tucked underneath. Not handwriting, but a printed line from the cafe's loyalty card. "Thank you for being here." She stared at it for a long moment before slipping it into her purse. Daniel saw her stand, gather her things. Her coat brushed the back of the chair. The scent of lavender lingered. She reached the door, hesitated, and looked back once. Toward no one in particular, yet toward something that might have been kindness. The rain had eased. The light outside was softer now, as if the world had taken a breath. She stepped out, leaving her empty cup behind, still warm on one side. Daniel glanced at his son. "Come on, Noah, time to go." But Noah didn't move. He was still watching the door. "She looked nice," he said. Daniel nodded. She did. They left their table as the cafe light flickered with the last of the day's glow. The city outside hummed, indifferent, endless. But somewhere between two unfinished cups and one quiet gesture, something human had stirred. Not loud, not heroic, just noticed. The next morning came without ceremony. Grey light stretched across the small apartment where Layla lived alone. The kettle clicked once, twice before falling silent. Another object that knew the rhythm of waiting. She poured hot water over instant coffee, the smell rising faintly like a memory of warmth she couldn't quite reach. On the counter, her phone sat face down. No new messages, no missed calls. Layla opened her wardrobe, not because she needed to, just because looking at clothes gave the illusion of choice. Every fabric carried a different story. The dress she bought after losing 10 pounds. The sweater she wore to hide herself again. She ran her hand along the hangers, pausing at the floral one from yesterday. The fabric still smelled faintly of rain. Downstairs, traffic murmured like a restless crowd. The world kept moving. She wasn't sure if she wanted to join. Across the city, Daniel stood at the kitchen counter of his small flat, buttering toast with one hand while checking his watch. Noah sat at the table half asleep, his school uniform slightly wrinkled. "Eat," Daniel said gently. Noah blinked. "Can we go to the same cafe again?" Daniel looked up. "The one from yesterday?" The boy nodded, chewing slowly. "Maybe she'll be there." Daniel paused. "People don't always go back to the same place." But maybe she will. The simplicity in the child's voice made Daniel stop arguing. He turned off the stove. "We'll see after school, okay?" Noah grinned. It wasn't just curiosity. It was care. The kind that children feel freely before the world teaches restraint. Afternoon arrived with that washed-out blue light that follows rain. Layla sat in her office cubicle, pretending to read an email. Her co-workers talked about weekend plans, small talk layered with laughter. She smiled when required, nodding at things she didn't hear. Her computer screen reflected her face back at her. She tilted the monitor slightly away. When lunchtime came, she walked outside, hands deep in her pockets. The streets were still damp, reflecting pieces of the sky. Without planning to, her feet led her toward the cafe. The bell above the door chimed again, softer this time. The same barista looked up, recognition flickering. "Table for one?" Layla hesitated, then nodded. "Same corner, please." She ordered tea, no food. She didn't trust her appetite yet. As she waited, she watched the steam rise from her cup, twisting like something uncertain of its direction. 2 tables away, an old couple shared a sandwich, cutting it neatly in half. The man brushed crumbs from his wife's sleeve without looking up. Layla watched the gesture, not envy exactly, something gentler, a wish for that kind of unspoken rhythm. She took a sip of tea. It was too hot, but she didn't pull away. By late afternoon, the cafe grew busier. Daniel and Noah entered quietly, shaking off the drizzle that had started again. They took the same table, by the wall, facing the corner window. Daniel didn't notice her right away. Noah did. He tugged on his father's sleeve, whispering, "She came back." Daniel turned. Their eyes met for a moment. Not surprise, just acknowledgement, like recognizing a face from a dream. He gave a small nod. She returned it, barely visible, no words. Just the faint echo of yesterday's silence, now shared deliberately. Noah began stirring his chocolate milk, watching the small whirlpool it made. "Can I say hi?" he asked softly. Daniel hesitated. "Let's finish your drink first." But she looked sad again. Daniel looked at Layla, sitting still, eyes lowered, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. He exhaled through his nose, unsure. He'd seen sadness before. In hospital waiting rooms, in the quiet after arguments, in his own mirror some nights. But this was the kind that asked for space. He reached over and ruffled his son's hair, Sometimes kindness is waiting. Noah frowned. Waiting for what? For the right moment. The boy nodded, half understanding. He went back to his drink. Layla checked her phone again. The screen glowed briefly. Nothing new. She opened a notes app, typed a few words, then deleted them. She wasn't sure what she was trying to say, or to whom. Her tea had gone cold again. She glanced toward the window. Outside, two teenagers shared an umbrella, laughing as rain soaked their shoes. It was a simple image, but it felt far away. Then, from the edge of her vision, she noticed the boy, the same one from yesterday, watching her again. He waved, small and shy. Layla froze for a second, then raised her hand slightly in return. It wasn't much, but it loosened something in her chest. Daniel caught the exchange. He smiled quietly, then looked away to give it privacy. Minutes passed. The barista wiped the counter, humming under her breath. Layla stood to leave, gathering her things. As she turned toward the door, Noah whispered something to his father. Daniel nodded once. The boy slipped off his chair and walked toward her. His small sneakers squeaked softly on the floor. He stopped beside her table, holding out a single wrapped pastry, a cinnamon roll from the counter. Layla blinked. "Oh, it's for you," he said simply. "You didn't eat yesterday." For a moment she couldn't find her words. Her hands hovered before accepting the pastry, warm through the thin paper. "Thank you," she whispered. The boy nodded, then ran back to his father. Layla stood there, holding the small offering. The sugar had melted slightly against the wrapping. Imperfect, real. She sat back down slowly, unwrapping it. Daniel met her eyes once more across the room. He gave a quiet nod, not of pity, but recognition. Layla took a small bite. It was too sweet, and exactly what she needed. Outside, the rain softened into mist, catching the cafe's yellow light. The bell above the door jingled again. This time, not as an ending, but as the beginning of something wordless and kind. The rain didn't stop that evening. It came in long, thoughtful streaks. Not a storm, just persistence. The city looked half asleep under its weight. Layla walked home slowly, the paper bag with the cinnamon roll still tucked in her coat pocket. She hadn't finished it. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away either. It wasn't about hunger anymore. Inside her small apartment, she placed the bag gently on the counter, as if setting down something fragile. The pastry had cooled, hardened at the edges. Still, it carried the faint warmth of the café, of the boy's hand. For the first time in a while, Layla didn't open her phone when she sat down. She just listened to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the rain against glass, her own quiet breathing. That same night, Daniel tucked Noah into bed. The boy was still talking about the café. "She smiled when I gave it to her," he said, pulling the blanket higher. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. "She did. Do you think she was lonely?" Daniel paused before answering. "Maybe, but sometimes people just have quiet days." Noah nodded like he understood. "She looked nice, though. Not like sad, Daniel smiled faintly. "There's a difference." He turned off the light. "Good night, champ." But as he walked away, Daniel's mind lingered. He wasn't sure why the woman at the cafe, Layla, had stayed with him. Maybe because she hadn't tried to hide her discomfort, or because she carried it with such quiet grace. The next few days folded into routine again. Work, school. The same routes, the same tired exchanges. On Thursday, Daniel found himself back near the cafe after a job meeting. He hesitated outside the glass looking in. Layla was there again, alone but not withdrawn. A book rested open in front of her, unread it seemed. She stirred her tea absent-mindedly, her gaze fixed somewhere between thought and memory. Daniel checked his watch. He didn't have time, but he went in anyway. The bell chimed. Layla looked up briefly, then down again. She didn't recognize him at first, not until Noah's name slipped from his memory and shaped his face with a smile. He walked to the counter, ordered a coffee, and found a seat 2 tables away, close enough to share the same light. The barista brought his drink. The hiss of the espresso machine filled the small pauses. Daniel glanced at Layla. She was writing something on a napkin, then folding it neatly. A small ritual of distraction. He considered saying something, a polite greeting, a thank you for her patience with Noah. But words felt unnecessary, maybe even intrusive. Then quietly, Layla's pen slipped off the table. It rolled toward him, Daniel reached down, caught it mid-roll, and placed it beside her cup. Their fingers brushed, just once. She looked up, meeting his eyes properly for the first time. Recognition softened her face. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey," he replied. His voice had that low steadiness of someone used to speaking softly. "Your son. He's very kind," she said. Daniel nodded. "He notices people. More than I expect him to," she smiled faintly. "That's rare." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "So is being noticed." That line hung between them, unpolished but sincere. Layla's eyes lowered again, but not to hide. More like reflection. The café began to fill, workers escaping the drizzle, students sheltering with laptops. The sound of rain faded into background chatter. Layla closed her book, turned her cup gently in her hands. "You come here often?" she asked. "Now and then," Daniel said. "Mostly when my son drags me in." "That's a good reason." He chuckled softly. "He thinks every sad person needs dessert." Layla glanced at the counter. He's not wrong. A brief silence. Not uncomfortable. Just quiet enough to let something real breathe. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday, was he out of line?" "No," Layla said immediately. "He was kind." Her tone shifted. Lighter now, less guarded. "You too by letting him," Daniel shrugged. "He teaches me sometimes." The rain outside softened to mist. Streetlights began to bloom against the glass, turning reflections into pale echoes. After a while, Daniel checked his phone. "I should get going." "Pick him up from school," Layla nodded. "Of course." He stood, slipping a small note under his saucer, a habit from years of scribbling reminders. As he turned, Layla noticed it. A folded piece of paper with a rough sketch. A little coffee cup with a smiley face. She almost called out to return it, but something stopped her. Instead, she unfolded it after he left. Below the sketch, in small handwriting, "Sometimes good people just need someone to see them." Her fingers traced the ink, slow and deliberate. For a moment, she let herself feel seen. She looked out the window where the rain had stopped completely. The street shimmered with leftover water, thin mirrors catching fragments of light. Layla folded the note carefully and slipped it into her bag beside the pastry wrapper. That night, she lit a candle, something she hadn't done in months. Not for scent or ambience, just to remember that warmth existed, even in small forms. She thought of Daniel, the quiet steadiness in his posture, the way he looked at his son like every gesture was worth something. She didn't know his story, but she recognized his kind. People who carried care like a quiet rhythm, not a performance. Her apartment was still small, her phone still silent, but something had shifted. For the first time in weeks, she fell asleep without her mind replaying every cruel word. Instead, she remembered a boy offering a pastry, and a father's eyes that said, "It's okay to stay a little longer this time." The next morning, sunlight broke through the curtains. Tentative, pale gold. She stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the city stretch awake. She thought about visiting the café again, not out of habit, but gratitude. Maybe she'd see them, maybe not. Either way, she decided to bring something this time. Not for herself, but for the boy. A small gesture returned. The story of yesterday had not been erased. It had only changed shape, from rejection to recognition, from silence to something almost like peace. Outside, the world went on, impatient, loud, careless. But inside, two strangers had found something rare, a pause that made the noise bearable. Saturday arrived with a slow brightness, the kind of light that didn't rush to fill rooms, but crept in softly, testing corners. Layla walked to the café again. This time, she carried a small paper bag. Inside, 2 homemade muffins, uneven, slightly overbaked, but made with care. She didn't plan what she'd say. She wasn't even sure she'd see them again. Still, she came. The same bell chimed as she entered. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and new beginnings. The barista recognized her. "Corner table?" Layla nodded. If it's free, it was. The same chair, same window, same soft hum of espresso and conversation. She set the bag on the table and ordered tea, jasmine this time, something that felt like change. Daniel arrived an hour later, hand in hand with Noah. They were laughing, not loudly, but with the easy rhythm of people who belong to each other. Noah spotted her first. "Dad!" "She's here." Daniel looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to quiet gladness. He nodded toward her, a small gesture of acknowledgement before leading Noah to their usual table. Layla smiled, her hand brushing against the paper bag beside her. For a few minutes, they simply existed in the same room. No need to explain why. When the waiter came, Layla gestured toward Daniel's table. "Could you take this to them?" she said, handing over the paper bag. The waiter blinked. "Of course." He delivered it with a polite smile. Noah's eyes widened when he saw what was inside. "Muffins!" he whispered, turning to his father. She brought muffins. Daniel opened the note attached to the bag. It was written neatly, but with hesitation. "For Noah, thank you for sharing something sweet when I couldn't. I thought it was my turn." He looked up. Layla was pretending to read her book, though the page hadn't turned in 5 minutes. Daniel smiled faintly and raised his cup toward her, a quiet toast across the room. She returned it, lifting her teacup with a small nod. It wasn't friendship yet. It wasn't romance. It was something smaller, and perhaps more real. When Noah finished his muffin, he walked over again. "This one was blueberry," he said earnestly. "It was really good," Layla laughed softly. "I'm glad. You made it yourself?" She nodded. "They didn't turn out pretty, but they're honest muffins." Noah tilted his head. "What's an honest muffin?" "One that doesn't try to be perfect," she said. He grinned. "I like those best." Daniel joined them halfway through, his jacket draped over one arm. "Sorry about him," he said gently. Layla shook her head. "He's welcome any time." Daniel sat, hesitant at first. The waiter brought another chair without being asked, as if sensing the table's quiet expansion. For a while they talked about small things, nothing personal, nothing heavy, about the cafe's old radio that only played 80s songs, about the mural outside that someone had half painted and never finished, about how Noah once thought rain was made by airplanes washing their wings. Layla laughed quietly at that, covering her mouth instinctively. Daniel noticed, the small self-conscious habit of someone used to hiding joy. "You can laugh out loud, you know," he said softly. Her hands lowered. "I forgot what that sounds like." Daniel nodded. "It comes back." There was no pity in his tone, just quiet assurance, shaped by experience. The afternoon light shifted from gold to grey. Outside, the rain returned, gentle, rhythmic, as if the sky had decided to hum along. Noah drew shapes on the fogged window with his finger. Circles, hearts, a lopsided sun. Layla watched, her tea long gone cold. "Your son's got an artist's patience," she said. Daniel chuckled. "Or an insomniac's," she tilted her head. "Long nights." "Sometimes," he admitted. "Since his mother passed, he gets dreams that wake him." Layla looked down, her hand tightening on the edge of her cup. "I'm sorry," he shook his head. "Don't be. We manage. He's stronger than I am." Their eyes met, not in sympathy but in shared understanding. Loss wasn't new to her either, only the shape of it differed. For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was shelter. The café began to empty again. Noah fell asleep on the bench, head against his father's arm. Daniel looked at him, then back at Layla. "You ever notice how quiet can be the kindest sound?" Layla smiled faintly. "It's the only one that listens back." Outside, the rain stopped for a moment, replaced by the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement. Daniel reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a crumpled napkin. He smoothed it on the table, found a pen, and wrote something. When Layla leaned slightly forward, he pushed it toward her. It read, "If you ever need company that doesn't ask questions, we're usually here on weekends." She looked up. "That's kind," he shrugged. "It's just coffee." But she understood what he meant. When they stood to leave, Noah stirred awake. "Are we going to see her again?" he asked sleepily. Daniel smiled. "Maybe, if she wants to." Layla kneeled slightly to his level. "Maybe I'll bring chocolate muffins next time." Noah grinned, the kind of grin that fixed something invisible. "Promise, promise." He held out his small hand. She shook it gently. Daniel watched. Not as a father, not as a man, but as someone quietly grateful that kindness still found ways to appear. After they left, Layla stayed for a while. The table still held the warmth of shared conversation. She touched the napkin he'd written on, folded it neatly, and placed it beside the first note, the one with the coffee cup drawing. different days. Same quiet message, you're not invisible. Outside, the street was brighter now. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the air clear and forgiving. Layla walked home with her coat open, unhurried. Her steps were lighter, not because the past had changed, but because something new had begun to matter. The next morning, she baked again. This time, she didn't overmix the batter. She didn't measure everything twice. She let things be imperfect, and they turned out better for it. Days blurred into each other, not painfully, but with the kind of rhythm that life returns to after it's been interrupted by something small and kind. Layla woke earlier now. The mornings still began in silence, but it felt different. Less empty, more paused. Like a page waiting for its next line. Her kitchen smelled of baked things again. Cinnamon, sugar, faint traces of butter. She'd begun to bake most nights after work, not to eat everything she made, but because creating something tangible felt like reclaiming space. The small notes, the pastry wrapper, the napkin, stayed folded in a glass jar by the window. She didn't reread them often, just like knowing they were there. Saturday arrived under a sky the colour of pewter. The café glowed against the grey morning, its windows fogged from warmth and weather. When Layla entered, she found the corner table already taken, by Daniel and Noah. She hesitated near the counter, uncertain whether to disturb their ritual. But Noah looked up first, and that was enough. "Hey," he called softly, waving his hand. Daniel turned, smiling in quiet recognition. "You're early today." "I think the sky pushed me inside," Layla said, removing her scarf. Noah grinned. "You brought muffins again?" She lifted the small paper box. "You guessed it." The boy clapped once. Daniel laughed. Low, warm, easy. "He's been asking since breakfast." Layla sat, her tea already steeping by the time conversation found its natural rhythm. The café buzzed gently around them, the soft hiss of milk steaming, the clatter of cups. No one here spoke loudly. It was a place built on low tones and small kindnesses. Noah nibbled his muffin, talking between bites. "Dad says baking is like math. You measure things." Layla smiled. "It's also like forgiveness." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "You can mess it up one day," she said, "and still try again the next." He nodded, thoughtful. "That's a good kind of math." Their eyes met, that unspoken space where mutual understanding grows quietly. Outside, rain brushed against the glass again, the steady rhythm filling the pauses between words. After a while, Daniel's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen. "Sorry, work." He stepped outside to take the call, leaving his jacket draped over the chair. Noah began drawing on the paper placemat with a dull pencil. Shapes of muffins, a coffee cup, a figure that looked suspiciously like Layla. "You're really good at that," she said. He grinned. "Dad says I draw people better when I like them." Layla chuckled softly. "Then I'm flattered." He shrugged, concentrating again. "You make him smile more." Layla froze slightly. "What do you mean?" "He doesn't laugh much at home," the boy said matter-of-factly. "But when you're here, he does." She didn't answer. Just watched the pencil move, the small lines of innocence revealing truths adults avoided. Daniel returned a few minutes later, his expression unreadable. He slid his phone back into his pocket and sat down. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Just work. Always too much of it." But his eyes had that distant tiredness that had nothing to do with meetings. They finished their drinks slowly. The sky had darkened, a deeper grey now, rain heavier. When Layla reached for the bill, Daniel shook his head. "I've got it this time." She hesitated. "We can split it." He smiled. "Let me pretend to be old-fashioned for once." She laughed softly. "You're not old." "Older than him," he said, gesturing to Noah, who was now asleep again, cheek pressed to the table. Layla looked at the boy, peaceful amid the noise. "He feels safe with you." Daniel exhaled, the kind of sound that carries both love and fatigue. "I hope so." He motioned for the bill. When it came, he reached into his wallet, hesitated for a moment, then tore a small piece of paper from the receipt pad. He wrote something quickly, folded it once, and slipped it under Layla's teacup. When he looked up, she was watching him. "What's that?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Just a bad habit." She didn't check it then, just placed her hand gently over the cup, holding the moment still. Outside, they stood under the cafe's small awning. The rain had eased into mist. The city glistened, quiet, silver. Daniel adjusted his son's hood, then turned to her. You heading home? Yes, he nodded. We'll walk you to the corner. She smiled. You don't have to. I know. They walked in silence, the sound of rain filling the spaces. Words didn't need to. At the corner, where the street split in 2 directions, they stopped. Thank you, she said softly, for being here. Daniel looked at her, not searching, not questioning, just seeing. Some people, he said, make quiet places feel less empty. She wanted to reply, but the words caught somewhere between understanding and gratitude, so she only nodded. He gave a small wave. Take care, Layla. You too. And then, as if on instinct, she called after him, Wait. He turned. You forgot your receipt. He smiled, the kind of smile that held a secret only half meant to be kept. Maybe it's yours now. Later, at home, Layla unfolded it. The handwriting was careful but unpolished. The ink had bled slightly where a raindrop touched it. It read, Some people see weight. Others see someone worth waiting for. She sat very still. The quiet around her wasn't heavy anymore. Her reflection in the window blurred with the streetlight outside, one image fading into another. She placed the note beside the others in the jar, but this time she didn't close the lid. Instead, she left it open, as if to let something breathe. That night, the rain stopped completely. Layla stepped out onto her small balcony, hair damp from mist, the city lights trembling below like reflections of quiet hearts. She whispered, Not to anyone, not expecting an answer. Maybe I'll wait too. The air carried her words away, soft as a promise. The next time she went to the café, it was almost spring. The air had shifted, softer, carrying the faint smell of wet earth and early blossoms. Layla hadn't planned to go that day. She had simply been walking, letting her thoughts drift through errands and half-decisions. But when she passed the café window and saw the familiar corner, empty this time, she found herself stepping inside. The bell above the door chimed, a sound she'd learned to love. The barista smiled. Morning, Layla. Usual? She nodded. And maybe 1 hot chocolate. Extra marshmallows, the barista laughed. For you? For someone who might come in, she said quietly. She took the corner seat. The table still bore faint scratches from cups and spoons, marks of lives crossing without announcement. Outside, a small boy tugged his father's hand while pointing at something across the street. She smiled without meaning to. She didn't know if Daniel would come. That wasn't the point anymore. Some gestures didn't need to be answered, only remembered. Her phone buzzed once, a work message she ignored. She opened a small notebook she'd started carrying, tracing the outline of the folded receipt she'd pasted inside the back cover. It wasn't a love story, not yet. Maybe not ever. It was something quieter, the kind of understanding that asks for nothing but acknowledgement. The bell rang again. She looked up. Daniel stood in the doorway, one hand on Noah's shoulder. He looked tired in the way people do when they've been trying to keep everything steady. When his eyes found hers, something softened. Not surprise, more like recognition of a rhythm resuming. Looks like you beat us this time, he said, walking over. Habit, she said, smiling. And instinct. Noah waved as he climbed onto the seat. You ordered hot chocolate? She nodded. Extra marshmallows, he grinned. Dad says too many marshmallows ruin it, Daniel chuckled, taking his coat off. And yet he always eats them first. Layla looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. Some things are worth ruining a little for. Daniel tilted his head, amused. You mean like muffins? She met his gaze. Maybe people too. He didn't answer, but the quiet between them felt alive again, like something mended. As they talked, Noah drew on napkins again. This time, the shapes were less random. 3 small figures under a rain cloud, each holding a cup. Layla laughed softly. You draw us a lot, he shrugged. It's easier than explaining things. Daniel watched his son for a moment. That mix of pride and ache only parents carried. He talks less about his mom these days. Layla didn't look up. Do you want him to? Daniel hesitated. I want him to remember, not stay there. Silence again, but this one kind, steady. Outside, the sunlight caught in puddles left by last night's rain. When the barista brought their drinks, she placed an extra cookie beside Layla's cup. On the house, she said. You 3 make this corner look like a movie. Layla smiled, embarrassed. Daniel thanked her quietly. Noah raised the cookie in mock toast. To muffins, math, and marshmallows. Layla lifted her cup too. And to small tables that don't stay empty. They clinked softly. No laughter, no grand music. Just warmth. Time passed gently that afternoon. Daniel checked his watch, but didn't move. "We were supposed to meet my sister," he said, almost apologetically. "She'll understand," Layla replied. "She usually doesn't," he said, half smiling. "Then maybe today's the exception." He studied her face, not in a searching way, but as if memorizing stillness. "You make things sound simple. They're not," she said, "but maybe they don't need to be complicated to matter." Noah tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Can we stay a bit more?" Daniel looked at his son, then back at her. "Looks like we're outnumbered," Layla laughed. "I can live with that." Later, when the cafe began to empty, Daniel excused himself to take a call outside. Noah stayed drawing, now sketching a new scene, a park bench, 2 coffee cups, a kite in the sky. "Do you fly kites?" Layla asked. He nodded. "Dad used to with Mum, but we haven't in a while." She hesitated. "Maybe it's time again." The boy looked thoughtful. "Would you come too?" She smiled softly. "Only if you promise not to laugh when I can't get it off the ground." He grinned. "Deal." When Daniel came back, she told him about the idea. His first reaction was surprise, then something lighter. Maybe gratitude. "We used to go every spring," he said. "Then I stopped pretending it was fun alone." Layla looked down, fingers brushing her cup. "It doesn't have to stay that way." He met her eyes, not with romance, but recognition. "Tomorrow?" She nodded. "Tomorrow." The next day, the park smelled of grass and sunlight. Noah's laughter carried across the open air as the kite caught wind, tugging its string like a heartbeat. Daniel stood a few steps away, watching. Layla's hair moved in the breeze, her hands steady on the spool. The kite rose, dipped, and rose again, the kind of fragile control that felt earned. When it steadied, she let out a small breath. "There," she said. Daniel smiled quiet. "You're better than me at this." "I just don't fight the wind," she said. "I let it take what it needs." He looked at her, the sunlight catching on his face, softening the lines worry had drawn there. "You're not just good at baking," he said. She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. They stayed until the light began to fade. Long shadows stretching across the grass. Noah ran ahead, chasing his own shadow. Daniel and Layla walked slower, the rhythm of their steps finding balance. He spoke first. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For sitting down that day. You could have left." Layla's eyes stayed on the ground. "Maybe I needed to stay as much as you needed someone to." He nodded, the words settling like rain on soil. At the park gate, Noah ran back and slipped his small hand into Layla's. "Same time next week?" She looked at Daniel. He smiled. "Looks like we've been drafted." She laughed, real, unguarded. "Then next week." That evening, she placed the folded receipt back into the jar, now beside a tiny paper kite Noah had given her. For the first time in years, the jar wasn't a collection of things left behind. It was proof of what stayed. The next morning, sunlight woke her before the alarm. The air felt lighter, not because life had changed, but because she had learned to meet it differently. She opened the window, breathing in the quiet city. A bird landed on the railing. Small, ordinary, alive. She whispered, "Good morning." It didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Spring settled in without ceremony. The days grew longer, the air warmer, though not enough to erase the memory of cold. Layla still visited the cafe on Saturdays, still sat at the corner table. Sometimes Daniel and Noah came, sometimes they didn't. She never asked why. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was simply being there. The place had changed in small ways. New flowers on the counter, a faint smell of orange peel in the air. The barista had started keeping their table free when she could. People had begun to know them as the quiet trio. But today, the table was hers alone again. She stirred her tea, watching the thin spiral of steam disappear into light. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the window, carrying the sound of distant laughter from the street below. The seat across from her felt empty, but not lonely. She'd learned that there was a difference. Her notebook sat open. Between its pages, a flattened napkin sketch of 3 figures beneath a kite, drawn in Noah's uneven pencil strokes. She smiled. It wasn't perfect. The lines were crooked, the sky too small, but it held everything words couldn't. The memory of a day when something fragile learned how to stay up in the air. When Daniel finally walked in, it was without Noah. He looked slightly different, his hair shorter, his clothes neater, a lightness that came not from happiness but from steadiness. "Hey," she said. He nodded. "Hey!" She noticed his hands, still calloused, still restless. "Noah couldn't come. He's at my sister's," he said, taking the seat. "School project," Layla nodded, half smiling. "He's growing fast." "Too fast," Daniel replied quietly. The silence that followed was comfortable, the kind shared by people who have already said the important things. After a while, he spoke again. "I've been meaning to tell you something." She looked up. "Okay." He hesitated, searching for the right shape of honesty. "I'm moving. Not far, just across town. Closer to Noah's school." She nodded slowly. "That's good. It feels like a new season," he said. "But I didn't want to just disappear." She looked down at her cup. "You wouldn't," he exhaled. "Still, I wanted to say thank you for everything you didn't make a big deal of." She smiled faintly. "You're thanking me for not trying too hard." "Exactly that." They talked for a while longer, about work, about Noah's drawings, about the kite that had gotten tangled in a tree the week after they'd flown it. When the rain began again, soft against the windows, neither of them moved to leave. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "The cafe one?" She nodded. He leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Every time I almost lose patience with something. Or someone. I remember a woman sitting alone, holding herself together while everyone else looked away." Her throat tightened slightly. "That woman's fine now." "I know," he said. "But she made me remember who I wanted to be for my son." They didn't say more. There was no need to. When they finally stood to go, Daniel reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. A folded note like before. She looked at it but didn't touch it. "What's this?" He smiled softly, just closing the circle. "You don't have to." "I know." He turned toward the door, paused once and said without looking back, "Keep showing up, Layla. You make places better." Then he left, quietly, as he'd entered her story. The cafe door swung shut, the bell's echo fading into stillness. Layla sat for a long moment before unfolding the paper. It was written in the same careful, uneven handwriting as before. Sometimes kindness doesn't ask to stay. It just teaches you how to. She read it twice, then pressed it flat between her palms. Not to keep it perfect, but to feel its texture. Outside, the rain had already stopped. Light pushed gently through the clouds, touching the table like a benediction. Weeks passed. She didn't hear from him again. Not directly. Once, while walking through the park, she thought she saw Noah chasing a kite in the distance. She didn't call out. She simply watched until they disappeared, behind the trees. There was peace in not needing more than that. Summer arrived quietly. Layla's bakery business began to grow. A few regulars turned into a small, loyal crowd. The cafe even began selling her muffins by the tray. When people asked about the recipe, she only said, "It started with a rainy afternoon." No one pressed for details. They just smiled and said, "Then keep the rain coming." Sometimes, late at night, when the city hummed low and steady, Layla would stand by her window and look at the jar on the sill. The notes inside, 3 now, had faded slightly, their edges curled. They weren't tokens anymore. They were quiet witnesses. She'd learned something unspoken from all of it. That kindness wasn't an exchange, or a debt, or even a promise. It was continuity, a way of saying I see you, even after goodbye. One evening, as she closed her shop, a little girl walked in, no more than 8 or 9, clutching a coin in her fist. "Do you sell those round muffins?" the girl asked shyly. Layla nodded, wrapping one carefully. "Who's it for?" The girl pointed outside, where her father waited near a bicycle. "He says I should thank people who look tired but still smile." Layla froze for just a heartbeat, then smiled back. "Your dad sounds wise," the girl grinned. "He says good things make a circle." Layla handed her the muffin. "Then tell him it's still spinning." That night, Layla wrote one final note and placed it in the jar beside the others. It said, "Some kindnesses never end, they just change hands." She left the jar open. Not to collect more, but to let the air move freely between what was and what would come next. Sometimes, the smallest gestures don't vanish. They ripple. A word, a seat, a cup left waiting. They echo through ordinary days, reminding us that gentleness doesn't need witnesses, only intention. And somewhere, between what we give and what we let go, a quiet kind of love keeps on breathing.